Please welcome back. Follow with me from page 9, from chapter 1 of the Maqasid Sharia systems approach. The history of the idea of Maqasid started not with the schools of law or the madhahib or afterwards or Shatibi or Shafi'i or Ibn Ashur or any of these people. It started with the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, listening to the Prophet ﷺ, and him reading the Quran for them and them trying to comprehend what the Quran is all about. In other words, it started with the human mind trying to understand the essence of the message. This is not a different way of looking at the message, but this is the natural way of looking at the message. In fact, the logic of the Quran itself, like if you read the Quran has a logic of always giving you the why of what it's asking you to do or not asking you to do, or what happened to the people before us, or why Allah created the mountains and the skies and the heavens and this and that, and why the stories that He related to us, the Prophet's stories and other stories, why they went this way and how, and always there is a why. There is a wisdom behind the story or the simile, the example that is given behind whatever that Allah created. This is the essence of the Quran. The question of why is very important. Unfortunately, it's very weak in our minds as Muslims, in the Islamic thought, in the Islamic community. Kids are not allowed to ask why. Normally, people are not supposed to question, kind of thing. And this is very foreign to Islam. The Quranic logic is the logic of why. And that's why the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, when he started to tell them do this and do not do that, it's in numerous places of the history that we know of the Prophet ﷺ, in which they said, well, why? Did he mean this or did he mean that? Al-Qasada, like for example, the story that is mentioned in page 9 about Bani Qurayza. Do not pray Asr until you reach Bani Qurayza in one of the battles, and long story. And he sent the companions to the Bani Qurayza tribe after they broke the covenant and they helped the enemies and so on. So he wanted the companions to go quickly and go and deal with that side of the battlefront. So he told them, pray Asr, do not pray Asr until you get there. So go quickly. Some of the companions went on the literal side, which is actually quite common these days. And in every era, literalism or, very superficial thinking is easier and fits a lazy mind better and so forth. So some of them said, no, he asked us to pray Asr in Bani Qurayza, then we have to pray Asr in Bani Qurayza, even if we arrive in Bani Qurayza after midnight. This is called, yes, the afternoon prayers, but this is the Prophet asking us. Others said, no, he didn't mean to change the rules of the afternoon prayers. If it is going to be sunset, we have to pray the afternoon prayers. So half of them prayed the afternoon prayers before sunset, and the others prayed the afternoon prayers late in the evening, because the Prophet said, when they returned to the Prophet ﷺ, he smiled. He didn't correct those who thought that literally you can pray the afternoon prayers after midnight, but he ﷺ, allowed both kinds of thinking. That is, to be neutral about an issue like that. But sometimes we cannot really afford to allow a thinking that is at the superficial level of the language and deny and ignore the why behind the language. When Allah is asking us to do something, to give zakah, for example, the charity that we give. Why zakah? Zakah is from the rich to the poor and is from a wealth that accumulates for a year and so forth, or something that you find a treasure or plants when you collect the harvest and so forth. This is zakah. From the rich to the poor, from the haves to the have-nots. This is the why of the zakah. But if you look at the zakah, similar to those people who prayed the afternoon prayer after midnight, if you look at it only because it's gold. It's like the red light mentality. It's gold. That's why you pay zakat. Silver. Yes, he took zakat from silver. But you have diamonds. Some scholars, even contemporary ones, say you have dollars or yen or whatever. No, you don't pay zakat for this because that's not gold or silver. They miss the why of the zakah. They miss the whole institution and its role in the society, and therefore the relevance of that religion in the society. If we're going to talk about silver and gold, then it becomes quite problematic when they said that, yes, silver and gold is wealth, but oil, if somebody is rich enough to own, oil fields or oil rigs, no, that is not wealth. That is not under the commercial chapter or التجارة or عروض التجارة. Well, if you plant barley or wheat, yes, you give zakah. But if you plant rubber or cotton or any of that, no, you don't give zakah. And I'm not talking about, unfortunately, I'm not talking about children judging that. I am actually talking about scholars in contemporary times who say that, yes, barley and wheat, yes, but rubber and cotton, no. Oil fields, no, it's not. Or you don't pay zakah, you don't give charity for that. And if you own cows or goats or sheep, that the Prophet ﷺ, similar to the ones they owned in Arabia, then yes, you pay zakah. But you own other kinds of animals that are much more valuable, different kinds of cattle, or even as Umar radiallahu anhu, as mentioned here in details on page 10, 11, and so on. Umar radiallahu anhu, when he, in his time, saw that horses are becoming very expensive, much more expensive than cows and camels and so forth. He said, well, why do we take zakah from somebody who has 5 camels and we don't take zakah from somebody who owns a horse that is worth 1,000 camels? And then he started to consider the horse to be a wealth that you pay zakah from. The philosophy of zakah, if I want to get into that briefly, is something that the government in an Islamic setting takes from the people. And it's different from the tax philosophy. I mean, they could be both anyway, but this is something that the government, the authority, whatever authority, doesn't have to be a nation state, but whatever authority that you have is supposed to count what people have and take 2.5% from the liquid wealth or the precious metals or kind of thing, and 5 to 10% from the plants, and about 2% to 5% depending on from the different animals and so forth, so that the rich gives the poor. This is the way by which a zero interest economy works in the Islamic perspective, because a zero interest economy cannot function if the hoarding of wealth is going to keep the wealth at the same value. But if the hoarding of wealth is going to decrease the value of that wealth by 2.5%, let's say, every year, then the hoarding of the silver and gold and the hoarding of wealth is going to be devaluing of that wealth. And that is how the economy runs, because contemporary economies work on the premise that people could hoard and the money generates money. The Islamic perspective says, no, money does not generate money. Money has to be worked and has to be invested and has to be used. Otherwise, the money is going to be eaten by the zakah. The Prophet ﷺ said, تَأْكُلُهُ الصَّدَقَةِ. The expression of the Prophet in Arabic is that 2.5% after 2.5%, you're going to lose your money in, let's say, 30 years. If you hoard this, 100,000 and not use it in the economy. So there is a whole philosophy behind it that if we're going to be literal and say that, silver and gold is zakatable, but other kinds of goods are not zakatable, and so forth, then we are serving some agenda. We could be very close-minded and limited, or we could be having a political agenda of serving some, the 1%, the top 1%, or the top 5 or 10%, depending on how fair the society is. We're serving those guys by relieving them from the zakah, from the charity that the authority has to take. In any authority that claims to be Islamic, this is something that it has to do. But they don't do that. And in fact, the line between the public wealth that is not zakatable and the personal wealth that is zakatable, that you give charity from, is blurred. You see in some of those countries in the Arab world or others, or you will find that the line between the public wealth and the personal wealth of the government in whatever type of tyranny that you have out there is actually blurred. So the government people, whether tribal or military or whatever it is, they just take from the public wealth. And that is the right and their privilege and so forth and what they deserve and this kind of thing. And you are talking about a stealing from the public wealth and exempting themselves from the zakah. If you say that, well, some of the officials have billions of dollars and so on, how come there is no at least a few millions that we see in zakah? That is, they say no, because this is public money. It has to be used for other things. And that is totally against the Islamic system that believes that any person who does public service is a servant, is a khadim, is a servant for the people. And that is all tied to the philosophy of zakah and sadaqah and waqf, endowments and charity, and all of the wealth system from the Islamic perspective. And if you connect all of these dots and look at them in an integrated way, you will start to develop a theory, a way of looking at the Islamic economics that is beyond the little legal tricks that we do in order to make a mortgage halal or to, I don't know, buy a car, buy murabaha. Fine, yeah, you could avoid, things that are considered riba or loans with interest. Yeah, but the bigger picture is a ribawi picture, is a total interest-based, unfair picture. And if you are not going to look at the maqsid, at the objective, and go by the objective as the basis of the rule, rather than the artificial, superficial kind of the color of the metal or the kind of plant and the superficial stuff, and you're not going to look at the wealth and distribution of wealth and justice and fairness and balance in the society, then you are not going to get the philosophy of Islam applied in the society properly. And literalism in that sense would be serving an agenda, an economic agenda in that sense, of some people who want to continue to circulate the money amongst them. As the Quran brilliantly puts it, كي لا يكون دولة بين الأغنياء منكم, or كي لا تكون دولة بين الأغنياء منكم. Allah is saying, subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the Quran, wealth is not supposed to circulate only amongst the rich. It has to trickle down, it has to come down. But it never trickles down if the authority is not going to enforce ways of taking from that wealth in order to bring it to the lower levels of society, those who are poor or in debt or wayfarers or people seekers of knowledge, students, etc. If you look at the zakah and what is supposed to be spent for. Similarly, if you are going to deal, and you go with the examples of Umar radiallahu anhu in these examples here, if you are going to deal with political issues according to the philosophy of Islam, of shura, consultation and participation of the masses in the public decision and the public opinion and its importance, etc., and you are going to take superficial things as the title of the Amir al-Khalifa or Amir al-Mu'mineen or Ayatullah or whatever, and you're going to not look at the why behind the authority, you are going to be enforcing dictatorship and tyranny in the name of Islam, as we see in many contexts in today's world, where tyranny is justified in the name of Islam, because people look at the letter and not the why. Why do you have an authority? It's not because of the blood of that guy on top, or a title, or somebody wearing a turban or calling himself a Khalifa. It's not about that. It's about the achievement of common good, al-maslahatul amma. As every Imam of Maqasid had said, Imam Juwaini had a brilliant theory on al-maslaha al-amma, the common good. In fact, one of the earliest theories on common good, for those who are into policy and interested in the definition of common good, or public good. One of the earliest definitions was Imam al-Juwayni talking about the public good being an objective of the politics, of the siyasa, not just, people who are in authority because of some media games in the democratic sense, or some tribal lies in the dictator sense, or whatever the monarchic sense. You will need a justification for the authority of these people that have to do with the public good. And that is the Islamic philosophy of that. So if we are going to take the superficial and the literal and the red lights and the green lights without looking at the why, how much public good is achieved by this system or that system, how much distribution of wealth and distribution of power and distribution of rights and obligations is done fairly in the society, and make this the criteria by which you judge whether this is an Islamic government or not, an Islamic bank or not, an Islamic art or not. Based on what? Not based on a superficial Islamic title or an Islamic kind of attire or whatever, but it's based really on the values. I was in Thailand, in fact, recently, a couple of years ago, and the brothers took me there to see the first Islamic movie in history, they said. And I said, well, Islamic movie in history, wow, that's a big deal. What is Islamic about the movie? They said that they have a Sharia committee that judged that this movie should be without women, and that is how the movie is going to become Islamic. I said, okay, so you don't have any women in the story? They said, no, there are women, but actually there are brothers who put on a hijab, and the camera gets them from the back, so they don't show that they are women. And also the Sharia committee said there is no music. Okay, so what do you use, a duf? And they said, no, there's music, but actually we're doing it with kitchen tools and so on. But if you hear, it's exactly like a guitar, but wallahi, it's not a guitar. I said, oh, okay, and what about the story? They said, no, the story is not important. It's all a hadith, and it's all authentic sahih narrations, and we are exchanging this. And okay, is anybody interested in that? Well, they said, we've been sold out for 3 months now. And I was shocked that this is something that becomes popular, however silly it is. But this is Islamic art in these young men's mind, that you are doing very, very superficial things, and the meaning of the art is not important. The objective, what you are trying to do with that movie, what kind of issue you are dealing with, what kind of messages you are going to give through or across to the observers of, is irrelevant for them. And actually we do Islamic banks like that, and Islamic parties like that, and Islamic tourism like that, and Islamic food like that. It's just a matter of slaughtering the animal with, as I witnessed to my surprise, that there is a computer in the corner of the slaughterhouse that says Bismillah, 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 and there's not even a person who is saying Bismillah. And nobody cares about the treatment of the animal and the sheltering and the watering and the food. How do you deal with this animal in order to make it halal? A computer saying Bismillah and the same good old slaughterhouse slaughtering the animals in the same way? Well, that is not halal. And how do you make a bank Islamic? By saying that this is called murabaha or tawarruq, but it is the same concept, 20 for 25, and take a loan and pay it in 3 years and give this interest. It's the same thing. They call it tawarruq, but it's haram. I don't care if many muftis gave fatwas about them, but at the end it's haram. It's 20 for 24, 25. And why do you call this an Islamic movie? Just because the brothers are wearing hijabs and the camera is not showing any women faces, and then what is Islamic becomes very silly. Why is it an Islamic party? Because you are pushing a candidate with a big beard and so forth. Where is your program? And what philosophy do you take in your program, the Islamic program, from an economic perspective or political perspective? What do you do with the social issues? And what do you do with healthcare and the poor and the needy and the shelterless? Why is it not part of the Islamic agenda? You see Islamic parties, in different parts, Southeast Asia, the Arab world, in the West, and so forth, people who are taking an Islamic approach to politics, And what they do is very superficial, because they want to justify something for them to grab more power, but not something that is for the sake of the people who are going to elect you or going to give you that authority. And that kind of approach is a problem that we have with Islamic thought. And Maqasid Shari'ah, I believe, if we develop it from being just the wisdom behind the rules and the wisdom behind the verses and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, from the wisdom to the basis, and from the hikmah or the principle to the philosophy and the methodology by which we will approach the issues. And yes, the objective-based methodology is going to be flexible and is going to allow new ideas and new thought, but that is what Islam is about. And therefore, Maqasid Shari'ah as research should move from being the wisdoms behind the rules and so forth to being the philosophy behind that state that you are imagining. What does it mean that you are calling for an Islamic state, as it is in every Islamic movement, the individual, the Muslim individual, the Muslim family, and the Muslim state? What do you mean by that? Is it, a gang, as we see in today's world, that calls itself Islamic State, and where, Anthony Quinn attires as he wore in the movie The Message, and then you make yourself Islamic? Well, what welfare of the people are you serving? What kind of Islamic cause are you serving? In fact, you're serving different causes, and anybody with, eyes and ears would see that the kind of causes that these gangs are serving. And yet it's Islamic because of the attire and the thobe. But the Prophet ﷺ wore a thobe, ﷺ, and so did Abu Lahab and Abu Jahl. The kuffar of Quraysh, the disbelievers, didn't wear jeans and cowboy hats. They wore thobes too, and amanas and everything. But this is not about that. It's about how Islam is manifesting in reality, the reality of the state in that case, how the institutions work and how they make policy, and what is the philosophy of that policy. That is how, as chapter 1 is, talking about different scholars and so on and different theories of Maqasid, that is how the different theories of Maqasid could serve development. I mentioned in page 24, 25, some talk about human development. I take reservation with that, my own writing, because human development, you can also critique it from an Islamic, Quranic point of view. So it's not absolute. It's not supposed to be a measure for how Islamic we are. But it's closer to measuring how Islamic we are from other superficial indices and superficial ways of looking at the Sharia. And thank you very much. Time for a break again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.